Welcome to Lesson 9. This is about my book. The book is titled, The Kids Are Smart Enough, So What's the Problem? A Businessman's Perspective on Education Reform and the Teacher Crisis. If you look at the picture on the cover, there is a question mark here with a picture of a teacher on one side and a picture of a kid on the other. And what the title is supposed to invoke is who's responsible for the problems that we see? Is it the children or is it the teacher? The book was published by Rowman & Littlefield and released in December of 2017. Here's some history to explain how I got into the business of writing a book. It certainly was not a big item on my mind in my life. From 2010 to 2014, our son John called me many times a week on his way home from his teaching job. These calls were very disturbing as he talked about happenings in his and other classes. Two things went through my mind. Number one, he was not able to teach nearly enough, meaning the kids were not learning enough. And number two, he was terribly frustrated because he couldn't do his job. However, these calls made me a quasi-insider to the world of teaching. In August of 2012, my son's school was issued an F grade by the state of Indiana, but they managed to negotiate it up to a D. Once I read this in the paper, I quickly called son John and asked, how about me getting together with the 3 other 4th grade teachers and do a study team to investigate why they were awarded a grade of D. A couple of days later, he called me to say they were not interested. They are worried about getting into trouble, and I forgot about the whole thing. 7 months later, March of 2013, John called to say that he and his fellow teachers want to meet. They are terribly frustrated, and now they are willing to take the risk of getting caught. You'll learn that teachers are worried to death about the bureaucracy. It is a dangerous force in their lives. We formed a 5-person team, 4 teachers and myself, and began to meet after school in restaurants and pubs. My original objective was to write a paper titled, What's It Like to Teach in a School Graded D? The paper was successfully completed and approved by the teachers, and I published it on the web. This turned out to be a terrible way to publish anything, so I decided to write a book. I titled it, The Kids Are Smart Enough, So What's the Problem? A Businessman's Perspective on Education Reform and the Teacher Crisis. It was published, as I said earlier, by Rowman & Littlefield and was released in December of 2017. Here are some high points from the book. Early on, I asked if the children in their classes, I said, had the intellectual capability to pass the state assessment exam. They quickly answered absolutely, but they just don't care. This or something similar was the same reply I got from approximately 35 other teachers that I queried about this issue. It and other findings is the basis for my book title. Every student in the class can be cataloged into 1 or 3 groups. Groupings are the creation of the teachers. I might say that I thoroughly enjoyed working with these 4 teachers and found them to be helpful and creative. So it was a pleasure. Much of the stuff that I talk about in this part of the book is their ideas, not mine. Here are the titles they gave the 3 groups. The first is the engaged group. These children are eager to learn and can be lightly managed. Number 2 are the followers. These are not bad children, but they are easily swayed and usually not in the good direction. The last group are the disruptives. They are the troublemakers. They are very challenging and difficult to manage. We then classified each one of their students into one of these 3 groups, and for the 4 classes together, about 110 students, we found that 31% of them were engaged, 46% were followers, and 23%, 6 children per class, were disruptives. We decided to measure 3 things. Number 1, multiple requests to follow directions. Number 2, failure to actively listen. And 3, a bad attitude or conflict. We measure the occurrences by student for each of these 3 metrics. We collected 44 classroom days of observations. The teacher was carrying a clipboard with each student's name on it and the type of problem, 1, 2, or 3, and they would make a tally mark every time this occurred. So then we had to decide how much time is lost for each one of these metrics every time it occurs. So the first one was multiple requests to follow instructions. The teachers felt that would be about 30 seconds by the time they repeated their instructions over and over again, and the kids did it and then went back thought-wise to what the teacher was trying to teach. Number 2 is failure to follow instructions, 15 seconds. And the big one was number 3, bad attitude, 4.5 minutes. Multiplying these times by daily occurrences gives 62 minutes of lost time each day for every class. Of this 62 minutes, 46 minutes, or 74%, are discipline-related issues. This all represents a loss of 28% of an instructional day. We subtract out getting started in the morning, lunch break, recess, getting ready to leave in the evening. Those are not instructional parts of the day. Another way to look at it is if a child attends the class for 5 days, they only receive instructions for 3.6 days. As we look at the disruptive students, what skills are they missing that other students have? Teachers began to list the following skills. The first thing they all said was they just quit. They don't have any grit. Another one is they go to conflict. They are willing to fight rather than talk, and so forth. As they listed these skills, most of them fell into a category that I had just recently learned about called character and grit. They need to be taught character and grit. So the next part of this process that we followed was to look for root causes. Why are these disruptive children such an issue? So the teachers came up with these 3 root causes. Number 1, parents or parenting. Inadequate parents or parenting. Number 2 is cultural. And number 3 is by choice. Some of these kids just choose to be hellraisers. There is much more in the book, including my recommendations for corrective action. If interested, it is available from the publisher for $30.